This week, a pivotal point in Detroit's bankruptcy, and it involves the entire state. The bailout, the deals, what voters really think, and what will happen next. MiWeek starts right now.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta.
There and welcome to MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Christy McDonald. We need your money. Simple, to the point. And that's exactly what Detroit's emergency manager Kevin Orr told lawmakers in Lansing this week. It is time to get the grand bargain done. The legislation is underway, but it is no sure thing. There is strong resistance from banks and other creditors. They want to sell art from the DIA to get their payback. Also tonight, reports this week say the foundations of the Big Three and other companies have been asked to step in and give millions to the DIA. But what do the people of Michigan really want? A new poll tonight gives us a look.
A new Epic MRA poll commissioned by the Detroit Journalism Cooperative, which Detroit Public TV is a part of, looked at what voters outside the city of Detroit think about the state's financial contribution to help the city exit from bankruptcy. On Tuesday, Detroit's emergency manager Kevin Orr testified before a state house committee as lawmakers continue to debate how to fund the so-called grand bargain. 600 voters were polled May 3rd through the 5th. A majority of voters across party lines, 62% in fact, supported state aid to Detroit once they were told the money would help protect city retirees' pensions and art at the DIA. Last week, lawmakers unveiled what's being called a hybrid plan. It would provide $195 million in a lump sum from Michigan's Rainy Day Fund, and the state would be reimbursed over the next 20 years with money from the tobacco settlement, and establish a 7-member financial oversight board for that same 20 years. 53% of the voters polled say they favored sending Detroit $350 million over 20 years from that tobacco settlement fund. The lump sum payment of $195 million was favored by only 30% of those polled. And perhaps most interesting, those polled do not seem willing to punish lawmakers who vote for financial support for the city. Overall, 55% said it would have no impact on their support for a candidate. And that trend continued even among Republicans, independents, and outstate voters. A solid 57% polled say it would have no impact on their vote. Perhaps the reason for the support? An understanding that a healthy Detroit is indeed necessary for the whole state to continue to prosper. A wide majority, ranging from 77 to 81%, say the city is essential or very important.
There is a lot to get to tonight, so let's bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, let's get right to it. And I want to start tonight with that poll that we just showed. The not overwhelming, but a pretty good chunk of support statewide for this bailout for Detroit.
Yeah, and it's consistent with the Glengarriff poll that Business Leaders for Michigan produced the week before. There seems to be an understanding statewide that the state has a responsibility to help Detroit here, and beyond that, that it's necessary to get the state's largest city healthy again, up and running for the competitiveness of the entire state.
You know, I think we had talked about this, that this would be a hard sell for people who are outside the metro area, outside of Southeast Michigan, but it doesn't seem like so much anymore. So is it just a fact that perhaps legislators aren't listening exactly what the constituents say?
Well, I mean, there may be some of that. I also think that the legislators are not as opposed to this as they're saying, right? I mean, this is not one of those sort of core hot button issues where people just say, look, I can't do this because I don't believe in it. This is a political issue and it's a deal, right? So the question is, what can you give me in exchange for me giving you this vote? And I think actually the governor and the leadership in both houses is working the process that way. You know, I think the legislators know there's not going to be any backlash against them for voting for this, but they raise that now as a way to try to coax some.
Well, in that poll, it said that that people would not punish their legislators for voting this way, that it would not change their vote in November.
And that's what the poll says. But these guys also hear from their constituents directly, and we don't know what they're hearing from them.
That's true.
Whether it's consistent at all with these polls, you know, it's a risky vote for them because many of them represent districts that have other troubled communities within them, and the folks are asking, what about us?
Right.
We're going to give $200 million of state money to Detroit. What about Saginaw? What about Flint?
Well, what about the
what about Benton Harbor? What about on and on and on? You know, it's not easy.
My column this morning talked about the members of the committee that's considering this. John Walsh from Livonia, where pensions are not fully funded, they're at like 56%. There's a representative from Jackson whose pensions and health care are grossly underfunded. There's a representative from Birmingham and Bloomfield who have huge retiree health care unfunded liabilities. These are common problems across the state, and what I would hope is that, yeah, you need to give this money to Detroit because you gotta get this bargain done, and you gotta get the city out of bankruptcy and sort of on the road to recovery. But I hope this launches a larger discussion about how we fund cities, how we help cities deliver services. The model's broken.
Well, hopefully it'll start a larger discussion on what we do about unsustainable pension benefits and promises.
Well, that's part of the equation.
You know, the answer isn't just let's just keep pumping more and more money
into
every troubled city. It's getting the cost of running these cities and meeting these obligations down to a reasonable level. But back to the poll, what's interesting here is, as in all of these polls that I've seen, even as you get far away from Detroit, even as you get into northern Michigan, far western Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, support wanes somewhat, but it's over 50%.
It's still pretty good.
It's over 50% in every single region of the state, which I don't think if you did a similar poll 5 years ago even, you'd have seen that level of sympathy, if you will, or recognition of the importance of Detroit.
Oh, so, I mean, are we finally at this point where people understand that a healthy Michigan has to mean a healthy Detroit?
I think we're getting in that.
We might be. I'm not sure. I was surprised, frankly, by the depth of the support in all of the polls. I mean, you know, if you go to the west side of the state or up north and talk to people about Southeast Michigan, they don't always have nice things to say about the city or its problems, or they don't necessarily make the connection between, you know, their part of the state and us. And so this suggests that more people do than might be obvious.
And it may be just a recognition of how bad
the situation is.
A Detroit that went completely under would be for the rest of the state. I think particularly in those suburban communities, because in Wayne and Macomb, out Wayne County and Oakland County, support was very strong, a little less so in Macomb County. Yeah. But it was into the over 70%
but again,
in the suburban communities.
Again, some of it could be that people recognize these problems that we're talking about in Detroit. They're outsized because Detroit's the largest city and dug the deepest hole. But, you know, Livonia, Birmingham, Bloomfield, those are stable communities that have the same problem with these legacy costs, but they also, you know, they also face the same problems that Detroit does in terms of the unbelievable drop in revenue sharing that we've done to cities, the threatened loss of personal property tax revenue. There are lots of things that we've done.
Which, by the way, will be replaced. You don't get people worked up about that.
Not dollar for dollar. But
the communities all support that. The municipal league supports that. You don't get people worked up about that, Steve. It's no loss to communities. But if you look at the package that John Walsh and his committee put together, it's not simply, okay, here, let's write a blank check, or let's write a check. And
well, no, I mean, there's oversight, and I think there has to be.
There's a lot of strings attached to that money, and I think that buys cover for these outstate lawmakers who can go to their voters and say, look, yeah, we gave them the money, but for 20 years we're going to keep our eyes on it. They've got to change their pension structure in the future so they don't get here again. There's a lot of oversight built into this bailout.
How did Kevin Orr do this week?
I thought he did as well as he could. I mean, you know, he's a pretty wily guy and knows his audience wherever he is, and he knew that he needed to sort of humble himself a little in front of the legislature.
I mean, but
where you've got
basically
a lot
he
of
said,
big egos.
"We need your money.
We need your money."
I mean, period.
Right, and there was a little bit of
lying.
No, right. I mean, there was a little bit of I think begging is probably the right word, and I think that plays with you know, some of the egos that you have up in Lansing who want to see that you know, you're recognizing that the power is in their hands. I thought the detail he included in his presentation was great and really impressive. Sandy Barua also, we should say, who's the chamber CEO, I thought made a fabulous case, and I kept sitting there thinking while he was talking how unusual it seemed that the CEO of the chamber, which is you know, a pretty conservative organization here in Southeast Michigan, would be up there saying, you guys have got to do this because, you know, a stagnant Detroit, you know, that doesn't get a chance to rebuild is a huge drain on the state.
And this problem doesn't go. They don't get rid of this problem if just by voting against the bailout. I mean,
no.
If they turn this down, the problem it just keeps coming back to their lap. They've got to figure it out. I mean, this is everybody's problem now. And in the end, Detroit is a constitutional entity of the state.
Sure.
And it's the state's responsibility to make sure it survives.
So if it's the state's responsibility, what could make the deal better? Or is this as good as the deal is going to get?
Well, you still have Bolger holding
the table?
out. Yeah, you've got Bolger still holding out for the employee unions to contribute some money to the grand bargain. That's not an unreasonable request. I don't think it's a doable request because there's no leverage to force them to do it now. And the unions he's talking about don't want the grand bargain in the first place. They still think there's a better bargain out there. So he's got no leverage on them. But you know, he sounds like he's going to stick to that at least for a while.
I mean, how much trouble could he make?
Not very much. He's out there by himself. Randy Richardville, the Senate Majority Leader, has not joined him in that, and the governor's not in that position. And I haven't seen a lot of other people in Lansing come out and say, yeah, my vote is contingent on that too. This is a pretty grand political drama that he's put on.
They're going to have to give him something to save face before he's going to come around. I don't know what that is, but he's going to hang on to this as long as he can.
I will.
All right, a couple of the other moving parts here. You still have the creditors and the banks who aren't even thrilled with this grand bargain. They want to take some of the art. They want some of that art sold. And then you have news that you've got the foundations of the big three and other large companies in the city of Detroit have been asked to help out the DIA and raise millions. And it always makes me think it's amazing the role that philanthropy is playing in all of this as well, that we cannot forget that role of the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
The foundations have been huge and philanthropists have been huge, and the big three coming in, 10 million from each from Ford and Chrysler, and Ford and GM, and 5 million from Chrysler. It's a big commitment. Now, you have a lot of other cultural and charitable institutions around town getting a little nervous about this, and you're starting to hear from them who say the pot's only so big.
So they're concerned about their programs, that all the foundation money is going to go to Detroit.
And well, specifically to the DIA, and you've got other institutions out there who count on support from the automakers and the other foundations, worried about the impact, because the pool of money didn't get suddenly larger. The charitable money at GM didn't get $10 million larger. They're just directing it here. So who loses out on the other end is a question we need to keep an eye on.
Who does?
Well, I mean, I think
everybody.
You look at the other museums in town are I think, at the top of the list.
And cultural institutions like the opera, the DSO.
Sure. You know, that's who depends on this money, and they need it. You know, the African American Museum is not in great shape anyway financially, and is in huge need of an endowment that its management needs to get started building, by the way. But that's going to be tougher in an environment where, I don't know, $400, $500, $600 million has gone to the DIA, and it's necessary. I mean, we have to save that museum, but it will make it tougher on everybody.
You're already starting to hear some people, you know, really concerned and already seeing sort of the impact that, you know, they're not getting the commitments they felt they were going to get. And you know, this is not just a one-year deal. This is, most of these commitments are for 20 years. This is going to.
And this is costing. Yeah, I mean, this is costing. If you think of the numbers that we're tossing around and saying all of a sudden, well, that's not so much. You know, I mean, at the state level, we started at $350 million, and now we're like, well, we're getting off easy at $200 million, right? That's going to this. These are staggering numbers at stake here.
I think when you say $200 million, though, when you start off with the $18 billion debt, I mean, again, it's all sometimes sounding like, I think what you're saying, monopoly money, right, when it comes down to it. But I want to talk about money, because we were talking a little bit earlier about the state surplus and the fact that there's a little bit of a change there from the projection that we saw. Could that in any way, shape, or form affect what we're talking about here in money from the state? Certainly changed
the dynamic in Lansing. We started out with $1 billion surplus projection. Now I think we're under half of that, aren't we? And you know, so that was money that they had committed. And some people at one point, some of the lawmakers said, well, we'll take it out of the surplus, or we'll repay it from the surplus. They committed money to roads, to education. They committed money they didn't have, and now they're not going to have, and now they've still got to find another $200 million for Detroit.
Why is there such a significant disparity between what the projection was and how do we end up there?
It was projection. It wasn't real money. And, you know, there was a flurry of tax revenue that came in the first quarter based on people selling and paying more capital gains taxes out of fear of a federal tax hike that didn't materialize, and so now that's slowed down.
All right, so we had all of this activity this week in Lansing talking about Detroit. So when can we see this all come together, Stephen, or are we going to see it all come together?
I still think we're poised for Mackinac to be the time that you're going to have everybody together anyway. The governor will be there. I think sometime that week is when we see all this stuff sort of congeal and you know, the deals get made. There are a lot of deals that are going to have to get made. I mean, this is not going to happen as a one-off. There will be lots of other things that are traded off in order to get the votes. But I still think that's going to be the window where this.
But what about the legal challenges, though, that are happening right now with the banks and the creditors?
Well, a lot of those, you know, a lot of the legal challenges right now, they know those won't succeed at the district court level. Those are to put that stuff on the record for the appeal. There is going to be a monumental case that goes up to the Sixth Circuit and maybe gets to the Supreme Court about the nature of this grand bargain, about the way the assets at the DIA were handled in this case, and whether that's consistent with bankruptcy law. The creditors believe that you have to rationalize that asset in a much different way than what this bargain is proposing, and it'll be up to Rhodes to write a good enough opinion that justifies the discretion.
And don't they believe that they shouldn't be treated any differently from that the pensioners are getting special treatment?
Sure.
They'll make that case, and they'll make the case that the DIA is being treated differently than what you can treat an asset under Chapter 9.
And if it is appealed, I mean, what does that mean for their goal of settling this thing by September or October when Kevin Orr leaves? And if it stayed by the court on appeal, what does the governor then do in terms of ongoing emergency management of Detroit? Because none of if this deal gets stayed on appeal, none of the savings materialize. Detroit's still in a financial mess. Does he say, okay, well, we're done, we turn it back over to the elected leaders and you all manage it? I don't know how he can do that.
Would Kevin Orr really leave in the middle of that? I mean, obviously his 18-month stint as emergency manager would be up, but is there any other way to keep him on in some kind of different capacity?
If the city council voted to continue emergency management and under his direction.
I mean, actually what the council gets to do is vote on him. Yeah. They don't get to vote on emergency management. So even if they say, you got to go, the governor could pick somebody else to come and be the emergency manager for, I don't know what the next period of time is, but the goal still is to get enough of these creditors to say that they want it, that the judge can justify a cram down on everybody else, which settles it settles the case and gets all of this sort of crossfire out of the way. So the ballots that went out last week, for instance, are incredibly important, not just to the pensioners who clearly you want them to sign onto the deal, but to enough of the banks too, to say this is as good as it's going to get. I mean, people also forget there is no money. These banks who want more, there's nowhere to get the money to pay them more.
Unless there's something happens with the water department.
The water department's
and
possible.
That's another thing that's still out there, up in the air, that the court really doesn't have much power in terms of forcing the suburban communities to sign on.
No, that's right.
So this has got to be negotiated, and I don't see those talks
not much
moving
move
at
on
all.
that.
And so, all right, we will continue to watch this over the next week or so and look for those intense conversations, negotiations around the Mackinac Policy Conference,
think that's when it'll happen.
which is right after Memorial Day. All right, turning now to Congressman John Conyers' fight to get back on the ballot. His campaign is appealing to the Secretary of State to get back on the ballot and backing a lawsuit that challenges rules for circulators. I want to talk first about, I guess, this lawsuit that challenges the fact that you should not have to be a registered voter to be a circulator, to be able to circulate petitions for a candidate. Do you think he has traction there?
He may, and I'm not unsympathetic to that argument, because the people who signed those petitions in good faith are being disenfranchised because the circulator wasn't a registered voter. And I'm not sure it's so important that the circulator is a registered voter as it is the signers are registered voters. There's no question that he's got enough valid signatures in terms of the people being registered themselves. This is a circulator issue. So I'm not sure it's a bad case. I mean, it certainly speaks to the incompetence of his campaign, and voters could look at that and make of it what they will. But I don't think these people should be, who signed these signature petitions, should be disenfranchised.
No, I think that's right. There's some case law at the federal level that suggests that for some ballot initiatives in other states, similar laws were seen as I don't know whether they were deemed unconstitutional or if they were in conflict with some sort of federal statute, but those ballot issues were allowed to go ahead even though circulators were not registered voters. I think that's what Conyers is banking on. It's a question about access to the ballot, and we sort of have it upside down. There shouldn't be a lot of burdens to getting access to the ballot. That should be pretty easy. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of efforts to make it harder, and you have to reconcile those with Voting Rights Act and Help America Vote Act. I mean, there are a lot of federal statutes that
you look at Michigan's voting laws, and now this is the third straight time, third straight election where we've had problems with candidates getting on the ballot because of technicalities in election law. And there's so many inconsistencies in that law. Lawmakers don't have to gather petitions, but congressional candidates do. Local judges, if you're an incumbent, you don't have to gather petitions, but your challenger does. There's way too many inconsistencies, and the object here shouldn't be, the law shouldn't serve as a gotcha tool. I mean, the law should help people who want to run for office get on the ballot. And I think we need to revisit that law.
Congressman Conyers, it seems, has changed some of the people around him in the last week or so.
That's a good idea.
And it seems to be looking that they're going to try everything that they can to make sure that they're in this election for now. I mean, there has been no talk, have you heard, Stephen, of him stepping away and saying, you know what, we're going to give up this fight?
No, and I think that's the tragedy here, right? I mean, you continue to ask, where are the people closest to him? It is past time, probably, for them to sit down and say, look, this is not the way you want to end a remarkable career and an important career. This is somebody I think we forget sometimes whose role in passing pivotal civil rights legislation was huge, who over the years has continued that fight with dignity and is the dean of the Black Caucus in the House. You don't want to see him stumble out the door.
And that's where you see it.
And that's where
he's not capable of holding this office and serving without being propped up, without his staff sort of being this shadow congressman. It's like Weekend at Bernie's here. And Steve's right, to have a legacy so tarnished, and what people are going to remember here, if he keeps hanging on much longer, is the senile John Conyers, and not the John Conyers of his glory days.
Is there any word of anyone who might be stepping forward to launch any kind of write-in campaign?
Well, there's a candidate on the ballot. I mean,
there's a candidate on the ballot, Horace Sheffield, obviously, but I'm talking about is anybody else.
The only person here who has even a remote chance of winning a write-in campaign would be John Conyers. And I don't think that's a very good chance because, one, it takes a lot of money, it takes tremendous organization. I don't see anybody else who has that on this short notice.
There's a lot of talk.
Last word, 10 seconds.
There's a lot of talk going on in that district about getting that organization and that money together to get somebody else on that ballot. We'll see if it happens.
We will see. And that's going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. Check out MiWeek.org for the latest work we're doing as part of the Detroit Journalism Cooperative. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Christy McDonald. See you next week for MiWeek. Take care.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta,